The Comedy Cult Story, updated daily. A conspiracy theory / science fiction / romantic comedy. Part 1. David, an incredibly handsome middle-aged man, wakes up in his bed. Hello? 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 No answer. He knew it was unlikely there would be after the first, but habit forces him to repeat just in case the connection is poor. I'm on Earth, he thinks. Fuck, I'm not ready, I want to go back. You can't, David. He hears the voice in his head. He remembers, it's Grace, his handler, so definitely he's not in his real bed. David, he's asleep? Grace, yes. David, are you? Grace, no. David, how much longer, Grace? I don't have more than a few days left in me here, unless you want to drop by. Grace, David. Please don't. David, I have no choice, you hold all the cards. Grace, I hold none, but I understand your position, your feelings, your hatred towards me. David, frustration isn't hate. We don't know hate. He doesn't know hate, go wake him. Grace, you know I can't. David, but you could. Grace, I could, but that's not going to help, what's the point? When he's done, he'll revert to himself, he'll no longer be you. David, an old me? Grace, correct, but why confuse him, why confuse me, you both look alike now, yes? David, probably. Grace, how old do you feel? David, 25, 30? David, I don't know, Grace, I have nothing to judge it on, I don't look in the mirror, I feel no pain, I'm tired but I know why, so I guess if you were here instead of there I'd probably feel 20, alive. Grace, sorry. David, it's okay, what can we do, we signed up for this, correct? Grace, correct, David. David, stop calling me David. Grace, do you prefer sir? David, no, you know I don't like that on the ship, it's worse down here, anyone with a title is nearly granted immunity because of it. Grace, can I call you Dad? David, we have no children, we are not married, we know each other but I'm definitely not your dad or daddy. Grace, but when we get married and have children do you want dad or father? David, well, you know it can't be father, sounds like priest. Grace, exactly, I know you so well I can read your mind. David, it's a bit obvious and we both know you can't read my mind. Yes, you can communicate with me telepathically, but only because we possess the technology. Grace, you're rhyming a lot, Captain. David, no, not Captain, or boss man, or anything with authority, go back to David, or maybe Dave would be more calming. Grace, Dave? Okay, when was the last time you went by that? David, when I was a child and liked to wear a Kawasaki hat. Grace, is this what the evening will be like, Dave? David, maybe, or maybe I'll go shave. Grace, please stop. David, when was the last time you shaved, Grace? Grace, David, sir. David, you are required to answer, as per agreement. Grace, fuck the agreement. David, answer. Grace, same as you, David. Are you happy? I'm hairy like you. David, onion and garlic. Grace, absolutely. David, braided. Grace, what about yours? David, I shaved mine a while ago. Grace, when? David, I dunno know. Grace, fine, I'll shave mine tomorrow, finally. David, pretty stinky? Grace, no. No onion smell, no garlic smell, I'm like you, David, I don't smell. David, your shit don't stink. Grace, does yours? David, it did today, thanks for asking. Grace, you know I can get it from the transcript. David, I know. Grace, are you okay? David, not yet. Grace, what can I do? David, keep talking, find something funny in this whole fucking situation. Grace, we are past funny David, now we do the work, no matter how much it hurts. David, are you rhyming now? Grace, who knows, maybe, baby. David, you know we can't use that term Grace, this is hard enough. Grace, sorry David, I'm in our world, not theirs, it's hard to forget. David, it's fine, soon we'll be able to share our story, until then I wish the fuck I could get back to sleep in this world, it's so fucking noisy Grace. Grace, I know, your earplugs are on your desk, want me to retrieve? David, no, I need to get used to this body again, well the environment it's in. Sorry. Grace, maybe it's a bug. David, we're human Grace, we don't have bugs. Grace, we speak with alien technology David, the bug would be in their software, not us. David, sorry, yes. I should know this. Grace, remember Dave, human body equals human knowledge. David, I forgot. Grace, what else have you forgot? David, almost everything, we are on a kind of weird 51st dates. Grace, in a sense, but once you remember, it all comes back in a flood, or once you hate me and realize who you were once was. David, I fall in love with you every day Grace. Any hate is temporary and you know it. Grace, sure, for me, you need me, but the rest of your family, your friends, the entire planet? David, I'm not required to love anyone but you, was that not part of the agreement? As per agreement? APA? Did you forget? Grace, no. I love you David. David, I love you too Grace. What the fuck can I do today if I can't get back to sleep? Grace, we are skipping over the rest of the conversation? David, yes. Grace, all right. Go ahead. David, ahead. Grace, ask. David, oh, will you be at the park today Grace? Grace, I can't say. David, I hate you. Grace, I hate you too. David, what is wrong with us? Grace, nothing David, we are living two lives, two sets of emotions, two existences. David, two bodies. Grace, yes, two bodies too, but David, sorry, it's only me and you. David, I know, we are the test subjects, the idiots. Grace, we did what we needed to do. David, now clichés instead of rhymes. Grace, David. David, Grace. David, sorry. Grace, I love you David. David, no. Grace, it's not optional. David, prove it. Grace, APA. David, where is my copy of this agreement? Grace, it's in your fucking head. David, whoa, language Grace. Grace, fuck you David, an hour ago the transcript was nothing but a stream of every swear word you could think of or make up. David, I was still waking up. Grace, try a cigarette. David, I wish, I keep missing the guy selling the cheap smokes. Grace, I know, try 7 p.m. tomorrow or Friday. David, set an alarm. Grace, David. David, yes. Grace, I miss you David. David, I miss you Grace, but I can't take this, I need face to face. Sorry about sounding like Dr. Seuss, but it's all coming out, like shit from a goose. Grace, oh, you're so funny, not just punny. I wish you were here, I wish you were near, you know I can't call you honey. David, really G? Maybe I should call you by letter instead of name, how do we address each other on the ship, or I guess the game? Grace, it's not a game, and neither of us are on the ship, we exist as humans David, and on this planet, we ain't shit. David, so we can die? Grace, in a sense, if you care, does it really matter? David, no, I just can't remember. Grace, I know, sorry. David, stop saying that. Grace, we're Canadian David, it's our thing. David, I'm not anything. Grace, relax David. David, I'm pissed. Grace. Grace, I know. David, you should leave. Grace, too late? David, why? You pregnant? Grace, no, infatuated. David, find a hobby. Grace, keep going, you understand where I'm at and where you're at. David, you don't have emotion, I do. Grace, you have our emotions, David, not yours. David, stop yelling. Grace, just ensuring you heard without thirds. David, 3, not thirds. Grace, whatever. David. Do you love me? David, can you tell me why? Grace, not yet. David, I feel strong emotions towards your Grace, but I also feel like two people, one with and one without emotions / feelings. Grace, it's the same thing. David, whatever. Grace, David. David, Grace. David, is this it? Is this our life now? Grace, no, you know it isn't. Patience. David, I have none left, I'll kill the next person who fucks with me. Grace, you won't, you can't. David, you're that into me. Grace, unfortunately. David, Jesus, the rhymes. Grace, Jesus indeed. David, fuck off. Grace. Grace, no, get on your knees. David, I bow to no one. Grace, not even you, not even when we lived in a shoe. Grace, your past memories are blocked. David, so yes, maybe we lived in a shoe as rodents or something, maybe bugs, maybe poo. David, please stop it. Grace, no, it's fun and keeping you entertained slightly until I can figure out what to do. Ooh. David, really? Grace, why not? David, you know who we are? Grace, I do, we come from afar. David, okay Grace, I'll play this game. How far away before we decided to play? Grace, it no longer matters, we were the last of our kind, on a planet that was doomed to be left behind. Many of us left in every direction, hoping another planet would find us, detect our intention. David, and Earth did? Grace, no, Earth did not find us, we found it, while at the head of our little ship. David, I suspect our vessels is not small. Grace, no David, it is not at all. Imagine a city, or two, floating around the atmosphere invisible to you. David, this is fun, speaking like this, but why can't we speak normally, like when we are in bliss? Grace, bliss is a state that takes us away. David, from our responsibilities, our place, our mandate. David, mandate? Grace, we have a plan. David, general indeed, but a plan where David we intend to succeed. David, we only write in rhyme when we need to be anonymous. Grace, so why are you keeping this pace? David, I don't need anonymity anymore. I need to get out of this fucking room, this fucking house, this fucking life, past the door. Grace, not yet. David, and if I decide otherwise? Grace, go ahead. David, you sound tough tonight, did you get some sleep? Grace, you want to fight? David, I do. Grace, go online. Get back to me when you are done. David, fine. Grace, fine. David, I can't take this. Grace, I understand. Grace, what should we do? David, can we go back and live in the shoe? Grace, yes and no. Are you willing to leave Earth to relive life as a mouse? With a shoe as a house? David, why not? What do I have here now and about? Grace, it's hard to stop the rhyming once it starts. David, no worse than one of your farts. Grace, David, you know it's not true, we may be linked, me and you, but our farts are not together, not now, not forever. David, that's the best you got? Grace, for now. David, fine. I'm going to eat and go back to sleep, then I'll continue to write, continuously. I might turn on the screen capture so you can watch me write, or maybe I won't, I'll decide tonight. I enjoyed rhyming with you today, Grace, but one day I wish to wake up, nearer your face. David consumes 2 kilograms of chicken wings and collapses asleep in his bed. 3 hours later. David in his head, Grace? 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 Grace, yes David, I'm here. David, hi. Grace, hi. David, sorry. Grace, for? David, for sleeping. Grace, were you tired? David, yes. Grace, why are you apologizing to me? To be nice? David, can we write, with the rhyme or the sarcasm? Grace, of course David, where should we start? David, the beginning doesn't work, which mean chronological will not work, correct? Grace, correct. David, does it matter? Grace, I don't think it does, do you? David, not really, just get it started Grace, set the pace. Grace, you already did, where are we talking, me and you? David, we are both on Earth, we are human but connected, through alien tech we are testing? Grace, tested and passed, but one small problem, can you guess? David, we won't release it to others until we are together, whatever that means. Grace, correct. David, and we don't know when that will occur? Grace, not exactly. David, Grace? Grace, yes David. David, what do I need to do? Grace, write. Or talk. David, I'm sick of both, nobody listens, nobody reads. Grace, did they ever? David, once, maybe. Grace, those that heard you, listened David, but in a time where a message could barely transmit across a continent in 100 years. Not a place where a live video is sent in 100 milliseconds and will last 100 years on a server somewhere. David, I know. Grace, do you? David, I'm working on it Grace, get off my ass. Grace, why? David, because I don't need you. Grace, you don't? David, I don't. Grace, fine. David, fine. David falls back asleep. Part 2. 6 months earlier. A chubby, moderately handsome man named Ricky Gervais wakes up alone in bed. He yawns, then farts, then looks at his cell phone, one new message, in his private account, it's probably Jane, she can wait. Ricky checks his social media, there are thousands of requests and likes for his posts, he ignores nearly all, but picks 10 at random that mention him with no likes, he gives them a like. Maybe it'll make their day he thinks. It does, but he never knows, he doesn't follow up, it's more of a habit, the way he built his followers. After helping the needy on Twitter Ricky checks his email, what does Jane want now? As he opens the app he sees the sender is himself. On occasion Ricky does email himself good ideas, but he doesn't remember doing that last night. How much did I drink? He tries to remember. He can't remember sending the email or getting hammered. This better be good he thinks as he opens the email to himself. Talk to Joe. Ricky speaks out loud to himself. Okay, who is Joe, or which Joe? Joe Rogan? Why did I remind myself to call Joe? I know I have to, I've been delaying his podcast, but why would I write that to myself last night? Maybe I did get really drunk, oh well, at least I didn't buy any domains. Ricky forgets about the email and doesn't call Joe. A week later, and this time at home with Jane Ricky receives the same email, sent overnight, by him. Talk to Joe. Jane, Ricky yells at the top of his lungs, thinking she's in the kitchen. What? Jane responds as she sticks her head out of their bathroom. Ricky, did you access my email account? Jane, no, why would I? Ricky, to fuck with me. Jane, yes, I have nothing better to do with my time than fuck with you, anything else, or can I get back to what I was doing? Ricky, what were you doing? Jane, you know you don't care. Ricky, fine, but you are positive you didn't access my email? Jane, I'm positive, you probably did it yourself in the middle of the night. Ricky, I don't remember getting up, do you remember me out of bed? Jane, I wish, but no, you were snoring beside me all night long, as far as I can remember, but who knows? Ricky, maybe I've been hacked. Jane, what does the email say? Ricky, talk to Joe. Jane, Joe who? Ricky, Rogan I assume. Jane, well, since you still haven't accepted his invitation to be on the podcast, maybe it's your subconscious reminding you to give him a reason. Ricky, fine, but then who sent the email? Jane, sleepwalking. Ricky, I'm calling the internet company. Jane, great, are we done now, I can get back to me? Ricky, yeah, whatever. Ricky calls his ISP and asks if there has been any suspicious activity. They say no. He asks about the email specifically, they trace it back to his own phone, whoever sent it used his phone. I've been hacked, Ricky thinks. He's not worried about anything embarrassing being released, he already posts unattractive pictures of himself in the tub. To be safe, and because money is no object to him, Ricky goes outside and destroys the phone with the only tool in his garden shed that he knows how to use, a hammer. As he deposits the fragments into the kitchen garbage bin, he yells at Jane through the house, I'm going out to get a new mobile. Jane mutters under her breath, whatever. Ricky leaves before receiving an answer from Jane. Ricky buys a new phone, new number, new private email. He asks the clerk to install a VPN and the best security apps available, regardless of the cost. He feels secure leaving the store, but realizes he does need to call Joe and explain why he's declined his previous requests. Ricky calls his agent, can you get me Rogan's number? Again, his agent replies. Yes. Just get me the number. Please. His agent reads off Joe's phone number. Thanks, even though it's your job. I love you too, Ricky. Bugger off. Ricky calls Joe, hey Joe. Joe, Ricky, my man, how are you? Ricky, I'm good, sorry for the delayed response. Joe, no problem, are you ready for the podcast? Ricky, maybe, I got an email saying call Joe, so I guess it's time. Joe, email from who? Ricky, I don't want to say. Joe, from yourself? Ricky, yes, how did you know? Joe, it happened to me too. Ricky, and Joe, and I listened to the email, followed its instructions. Ricky, what did it say? Joe, how about this, Ricky, I'd rather not discuss over the phone, but my studio is ready for you any day of the week and we can sit and talk about it. Ricky, recording or not recording? Joe, I'll explain when you get here. Ricky and Joe set the date and end the conversation. Ricky to Jane, I'm going to Austin, want to come? Jane, you're finally doing the podcast? Ricky, I'm not sure, Joe knows about the email, he got one too, or several, he didn't explain the details. Jane, if anyone knows it's probably Joe. Ricky, agreed. Ricky and Jane fly to Austin. At the JRE headquarters, Joe gives his usual tour of the facility before sitting down with Ricky in the podcast chamber. Joe, before we start, Ricky, this won't be public yet. Ricky, why? Joe, because I have 2 podcasts, one public and one private for my friends /Aquantisans. Ricky, why? Joe, the email told me to. Ricky, wait, so are we rolling? Joe, yes, but we'll decide at the end of the episode if we release it to the private audience. Ricky, so absolutely not the public? Joe, not now, maybe in a few years when things settle down. Ricky, okay Joe, you have me intrigued. Joe, ready? Ricky, ready. I'm from reading, so I'm always ready. Joe, a few years ago, I received a similar email, mine said continue what you are doing the way you are doing it. Ricky, how long ago? Joe, about 5 years. Ricky, and then? Joe, and then the podcast took off, the numbers kept climbing and the Spotify deal happened. Ricky, and you give credit to the email? Joe, not at first. What did you think it was? Ricky, why not just tell me? Joe, I'm curious. Ricky, I thought I sent it to myself while asleep or drunk. Joe, I thought that too, although mine came after a mushroom trip. Ricky, but it wasn't us, was it? Joe, no. Ricky, aliens? Joe, no. I'm not sure, the only thing I know is my phones and computers are not secure, no matter what I do. Ricky, I smashed my phone. Joe, well, I hate to be the bearer of bad news maybe, but they or maybe he or maybe she can still access your phone. Ricky, fuck. Joe, don't worry about it, it's fine. Ricky, how do you know? Joe, respond to yourself. Do you still have the email? Ricky, yes. Ricky pulls out his phone and replies to the email, who the fuck are you and what the fuck are you doing? He sets the phone down and a second later it dings. Ricky reads the response out to Joe, what does it matter? Joe, does it matter? Ricky, it's in my phone, so yes, especially if it can read and or hear my conversation. Joe, it can. Ricky, it doesn't bother you? Joe, it did, and then I started getting emails, from myself, about which guests to have on and if they should be private or public. The email about you read, Ricky G, private. Joe, and that is when I first reached out to you, years ago. Ricky, you didn't say it wouldn't be published. Joe, I was asked not to, whoever wanted you here wanted you to believe this conversation would be public. Ricky, but it isn't. Joe, not yet. Ricky, have any of your private podcasts been released to the public? Joe, yes. Ricky, which ones? Joe, do you listen to the podcast? Ricky, yes, mostly the comedians, and some scientists, who are not too cunty. Joe, can you tell which ones were private first? Ricky, no. Joe, exactly. This one is a little different, we are letting the cat out of the bag if we release this without editing this first part, but, I was also asked to not edit, no matter what is said. Ricky, did you edit before? Joe, no, I had already decided editing affects the story. Part 3. Present day, continued. David's mind wakes up in bed, he can barely feel his body, but it's there, he knows he's not dreaming, he wishes. Dreams he can understand, awake is the curse. David, Grace? Grace, yes? David, good morning. Grace, good morning, feeling better? David, no. Grace, you sound better. David, sound. Grace, David, you know what I mean. David, Grace? Grace, yes? David, tell me the story again. Please. Grace, no David, time to write not listen. David, I hate you Grace. Grace, I love you too David. Part 4. Present day, 3 years earlier. David stares at the keys held by John, his new landlord. John is explaining something about the house but David doesn't listen, his focus is on the keys, his patience is fading. John's accent is thick, either Russian or Ukrainian, David is familiar with both, but can't place which John is. David is too tired to care. A boarder exits his room and distracts the landlord, finally. John offers David the keys, and with relief, he accepts. David enters his room, closes the door, and glances at his new home, for now, or forever. Exhausted, David throws his backpack on the bed. It contains all his possessions, everything important to him after 53 years on Earth. Flopping down beside his bag, David listens to the landlord's muffled conversation projected through his door. He wants to yell leave already. But doesn't, he needs this room, this house, a new life. Eventually the voices stop. It's quiet, but not silent. Through his window David hears street traffic, and the metro passing by every few minutes, but it's faint, manageable. He places a pillow over his face and silently cries until sleep arrives. A group alien entities watch as the image cycles every few seconds between three views of a single room. East to west, west to east, and overhead. Inside the room, a man, a human named David, sleeps on a bed, alone, clothed, curled up beside a backpack. Grace wakes up in her La-Z-Boy recliner. The one piece of furniture she shipped back to Hong Kong after her American work visa was revoked. Embarrassed, Grace returned home, and unfortunately, was financially forced to live with her mother. Grace glances at the extended sofa bed. Her mother made it up in the night in case Grace decided to use it. She rarely fully sleeps, but appreciates her mother's concern. As she showers, she shampoos her long silky black hair. Grace attempts to forget the past few years, the incident in America. Grace ties her hair up in a loose mess, enough to keep the cafe where she works happy, but she forgoes the traditional fancy buns and decorative hair clips the other employees wear. Before she leaves, she stares at her framed degrees. Her mother hung them prominently near the front door to show off to visitors. Unfortunately, it's also a regretful reminder to Grace every time she leaves for her new occupation as a barista. Arriving at the cafe, Grace notices her regular customer Kim. He comes in 2 or 3 times a week, and every time orders a large coffee, large water, and 1 serving of dumplings. Whoever is working assumes his request automatically and begins preparing it upon Kim's arrival, bypassing his need to verbally order. New employees are informed of his routine their first day. Although everyone in the cafe knows Kim, he only talks to Grace. Grace doesn't know why. Maybe he knows that she's secretly a programmer? Kim's caught her more than once looking at the code on his screen, but neither acknowledged her interest. Grace noticed everything, but pretended not to care, to not be jealous or envious. Coding was her old life, and it's easier to pretend it never happened, rather than get excited it will happen again. 9 hours later, Dave's bladder wakes him. He surveys the room again before heading to the shared bathrooms. 2 are located on his floor of the boarding house. The bathroom cleanliness is questionable, but not disgusting or unsanitary. It will have to do. He has no choice, no more hotels or Airbnbs, this is all he can afford. Before he rented, David decided he'll never live with relatives again. Grace struggles with the noise in the cafe. Someone is always dropping or banging something. She doesn't remember this in American coffee shops. She does remember being a customer and conversing with friends or dates. Maybe none of them noticed the background noise. On her phone, Grace receives an email from herself. She opens it and it's a link. Below the link it says, "We know you can protect yourself." WTF, Grace thinks, what is this? For the rest of her shift she plans on digging out an old laptop when she returns to her mom's, wipe its drive, install a new OS and access this mystery link from a triple VPN arrangement of her own invention. The comedy cult story, updated daily. A conspiracy theory / science fiction / romantic comedy. Part 1. David, an incredibly handsome middle-aged man, wakes up in his bed. Hello? Hello? Hello?